This week in Pure Reinvention.
But there's nothing more rewarding than finding that employee that comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to try this. What do you think?
Episode 77, Dan Trotochaud, President of Superior Hospitality Partners.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this episode of Pure Reinvention, where we create space for the unexpected by inspiring a reinvention lifestyle. Misty, entrepreneurship is really important in reinvention.
And Dan has a lot of lessons to teach anyone, but if anybody's in a leadership position, this is the podcast for you to listen to.
I'm not sure we spent a tremendous amount of time talking about the importance of entrepreneurship, the importance of accountability, the importance of being responsible for the bottom line. Dan has lived that. Mm-hmm. Dan lives that, and he is, in everything he talks about, he focuses on that.
Oh yeah, you'll get a healthy dose of it today. And Dan comes from that place of seasoned expertise, that he has so much good advice wrapped up into very concise, clear statements. I think you'll get a lot out of this, even though it's a relatively short podcast, which we're trying to keep them short for you, our listeners.
I have met with Dan on numerous occasions, and every time I have immersed myself into the conversation and learned something new, and I know our listeners will this today.
This week's episode is sponsored by MB Strategies. MB Strategies focuses on your success and provides you with sustainable results by identifying opportunities, guiding you through implementation, and navigating you to greater results. Contact MB Strategies today at mbstrategiesllc.com to start your reinvention journey.
Dan, we always start these conversations out with these three big questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Of the 5 fundamentals of reinvention, which step do you most closely align yourself with?
I would have to say ownership.
Dan, what is your superpower?
My superpower, being able to take a very difficult situation, calm both sides, and convince them that the way I want is the right way.
And then finally, all great leaders have something that kind of bugs them and keeps them up at night. What is that thing for you?
Well, not quite as much as I had in the past, but the thing that keeps me up at night is, what can I do to motivate the person I'm working with to get the point across? They don't always get it. You can tell it to them, you can explain it to them, you can show them how, but they don't always, the light doesn't go on. So turning that light bulb on and keeping it on.
Dan, you are also a past board member for the Michigan Lodging and Tourism Association, a longtime board member.
Very long time.
How many years?
30 years.
Yeah. So I want to go back to your recognition, the ownership step in reinvention you most closely align with. Why do you feel that way?
Well, I think that it may sound vain, but the reality is you need to convince a staff of any sort, whatever the business is, to work and act like an owner. And if you have a staff, whatever they're doing, whether they're the custodian or they're manufacturing a product, if they're all acting like the owner and thinking like the owner, it's easier to work with them and bring that team together to get the results you're after.
Now, every business leader will say that's their objective. But we don't always get that group of people to begin with, do we?
No, you certainly don't. And part of it is the interview process. Sometimes the person that you're interviewing and deciding you want for that position may not have the resume or the credentials to put them in that position. But if you see that they click, they're looking and they're listening and they're asking the right questions, you can teach someone just about anything. But it's a matter of having that personality that makes it happen.
Are you suggesting that sometimes we make the mistake of hiring an individual for their specific skill set instead of maybe their curiosity?
Absolutely. I think that one of the problems is if I hire somebody, but they have a background that might not be the direction I want that position to go, I'm making a mistake in that hiring decision. I want somebody that's eager. It's great if they know something about it, but if I can bring them along in the direction that I want for the final product, as in the hotel industry. The final product is guest satisfaction. And if you don't have your housekeepers and your maintenance and your front desk, everybody buying into that process, it doesn't work.
So they've all got to agree and own the fact that the guest experience is the single focus.
Absolutely. And in a very short period of time, sometimes the interview is a little misleading. You have a great person that does a lot of interviews and they do a wonderful job and you make a mistake. I'm certainly not a person that's never made a mistake in hiring. But once you've started in a very short period of time, you will see, are they buying into your philosophy? And I always taught a little class at the beginning of an employment relationship, and I called it Dan's philosophy. And I wanted them to understand the things that I believed in. And not necessarily was that driving money to the bottom line. And I probably could have been a lot more successful in a number of ventures financially, but I feel good about it. I sleep better at night because of the way that I did it. I did it with the idea that the customer is right, even though the customer may be wrong. The customer is right, and we operate our position and the position in the business as if that's what we're after. And when we do that, we end up getting the bottom line is much better than it would be if we didn't care and all we cared about was the bottom line. There's a big difference in how you go about an operation, if it's bottom line focused or customer service focused. You have to get to a bottom line, but the best way to get there is through that customer, through repeat service.
So you're suggesting that the focus for a business that's wanting to reinvent itself is to focus on customer experience, the customer experience.
Exactly. It really doesn't matter. I mean, I've had a number of different businesses, whether it be photography or tuxedos, bridal salon, framing, art gallery, hotels. It really doesn't matter. Even back in my early days of being in the classroom as a teacher, one of the things that you have to do, you had to have those students buy into what you were teaching. If you were just teaching it, they didn't get it. But if they bought into the concept of why they should be paying attention and what they're going to learn from this, you're a heck of a lot better off.
Okay,
so great classrooms.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a minute, Dan. The employees, right, have to buy in to owning their role in customers' experience. How do you give them that latitude and that freedom to discover what those things are?
Well, first of all, training. But secondly, you make them feel comfortable with whatever decision they make is right the first time. So after they make the decision and you look at it and you say, that may not have been the right decision, we'll sit down and we'll talk about why that's not the right decision instead of saying, what a dumb decision you made there.
So you're saying that the most critical way that leaders can encourage their team members in owning their role in decision-making is to always encourage whatever decision they make in a positive way first.
First and foremost, the positive. Before you, and it may not even be in the same discussion where you have the discussion about the next time you're in this same situation, here's the way I would do it, and this is how it fits into Dan's philosophy.
Right.
And I always go back to that, but don't, so many people you walk in and they just made a mistake. And, as far as you're concerned, and you reprimand them, you write, I'm going to write you up, all of these silly things that happen. And it happens all the time. I mean, you can see it as you shop, as you go to services available all over the country. You'll see that happen in different places. That's not how you get it done. So if the person doesn't catch on, you have to get rid of them. They have to understand this might not be the industry for them and encourage them again and maybe even help them with what might be a good place fit for them.
So in your example, ownership is encouraged.
Absolutely.
Your role is to open that door and to invite them in and to encourage them step by step to take more and more and more ownership along the pathway of where your vision is.
That's the way I've operated for many years. I'm getting up there in years, so it's been many years. But
so what you don't do is open the door and then let them go.
No, absolutely not. First of all, you have to set some parameters. You have to set, here's the table that we have set, and here are the items that are on the table. Ultimately, we'd like to make a profit here, and this is how we go about doing it. But if you have a new idea or a different way to move those plates around the table, absolutely, let's discuss it. Let's implement it. Let's try it in a small scale before we implement it across the company, and it may work, but it may not. But there's nothing more rewarding than finding that employee that comes to you and says, hey, I'd like to try this. What do you think?
How does a leader open up that environment, Dan, so that people feel comfortable coming to their boss or to another team member wanting to discuss the new idea?
Okay. Well, I think there's a great deal of difference. One winter when my hotel was closed, I worked for a large hotel chain, and it was a friend. He needed help in a very menial task position. I needed something to do for 2 months. Somebody was out on surgery, and I was the bottom of the totem pole, and I did that job as if I was the CEO of the company, because that's my philosophy, how you go about it. And in this particular situation, his door may not have been open to all of the employees. It happened to be open to me because I was a friend of his. But open that door, do the tasks, the menial tasks in the hotel industry. Any general manager or owner that hasn't plunged a toilet, made a bed, picked up a mess in the pool area or whatever, right alongside of those line level employees, is making a huge mistake. You can't sit in an office and say, I'm not going to do that. I have a master's in plungology.
So you have to be known as one who's willing to get their hands dirty.
Yes, but you're not doing that day after day. You're doing that to show them and set the example. But you can get your hands dirty, and it shows them that ownership is not above the task that they're asking their staff to do. And once you have that instilled in them, and it starts real early, you'll have a very loyal staff. Those that make it through the first 30 days, they're with you for a long time.
So in your book, you can tell within 30 days whether someone has the capacity of ownership.
Yes. It's not that I always didn't give them 45 or 60, but
right.
The reality is I've pretty much decided that they do or don't have what I'm looking for. And then we start looking at more intense training. And if it doesn't come around real quick, you're wasting your time. It's very expensive to train somebody and then have them leave after 60 or 90 days.
So in the first 30 days, they may not have your ownership expectations down perfect. They've just shown they have the capacity to learn what that ownership role is.
Absolutely. You need that capacity. And if the person that you're dealing with does not have that capacity, then you just have to move on, because there's too many opportunities to fail.
So as a leader, we just need to always have our radar open to be evaluating whether the next person that we are being introduced to has the triggers that say, hey, I can be an owner.
That's right. And you know what's more rewarding for somebody that started in the hotel industry, maybe in the housekeeping department or in maintenance or something, and all of a sudden at age 40, they've worked their way for a long period of time and have an opportunity to buy into something. Somebody really believes in them well enough that says, I want you to stay with me, and I want you to be, here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to start rewarding you with some stock. And I'm going to get you enough stock that you'll have enough equity that when I decide to move on, this is an opportunity for you to be an owner. What a great opportunity. And I've had several occasions that have worked exactly like that. And I go back to them today and, gee, Dan, you helped us so much. We would never have done this without you.
My guess is you're going to tell me that they also were willing to help themselves.
Oh, absolutely. They had to work. But once you found that the characteristic, that ownership characteristic, then, I mean, it's just a natural.
It should be very satisfying to you to see this whole new generation of individuals that are entering and in the workforce now who really are looking to own a special kind of work that they want to do today.
Oh, it's very rewarding. And it's also interesting, and I love seeing it. And you're part of it. Your organization is part of this. It's the opportunities that people have a place to go for some guidance, some help, that you can connect them with the right people. And all of a sudden, that person has these opportunities that are endless. The sky's the limit. There's nothing that an individual can't do if they put their mind to it.
Dan, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, right now, because we're just starting, the best way is dantrotochaud@yahoo.com.
Dan Trotochaud, a successful owner, entrepreneur, community involved, and downright nice person. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Mike.
See, Mike, I told you this was a great conversation.
It was. Dan is the ultimate owner, and why we have step 2 in the reinvention process as own. When you go into a project and you're looking to reinvent, you look for those individuals who are willing to own whatever is next. And Dan is a perfect example of how to own.
Well, how to own and how to empower other people to take ownership. So I learned from him in this conversation alone, and I'm sure that if I sat down with him again, there would be 10 more nuggets. But about giving the people, the staff or stakeholders, the opportunity to make decisions and give the freedom to make decisions, and even if they're the wrong ones, letting them be comfortable with it.
Here's what key leaders know. Key leaders own their own work. They own wherever their reinvention project is going, but they know their work becomes easier and better if they have more people that can own as well. So they're always looking to cultivate and encourage other people to own to whatever degree they're ready and willing to take ownership. And I think Dan talked about how to create ownership with people you work with.
Right, that's exactly true. And I want to go back really fast to say, not punish it. So I think in this day and age, we get so quick to say, this was good, this was bad, let's move on. Sometimes it's just good that you took the ownership, and it might not have been the right decision, but you can have that conversation a little bit down the road. It doesn't have to be so immediate.
I think what Dan, in fact, said was you let people own their part of the work. You let them make decisions appropriate for their level of experience. If there's areas where the decision could be better, then afterwards you can walk them through how you might have done it differently. But absolutely, the more people that you can encourage to be owners and who will own their work, the magnitude of success becomes greater.
So speaking of that, you got to start by hiring those people.
Yes, and I thought Dan had a wonderful example of how he views selecting people more based on personality and ownership capacity rather than on technical skill set.
Right. And we've heard it before on this podcast where we've had other people tell us that. And I think it just is important to drive home again and again, because you can teach so many of the day-to-day skills. But if you hire that capacity and passion and ownership, if they already have the buy-in, that's the low-hanging fruit of having a good employee there.
I would encourage anybody that's in a supervisory position to think about, of all the interview questions that you ask, of all the traits you're trying to understand from the person you're interviewing, how many questions do you really ask that get to their experience level with ownership, and whether they've really owned anything and whether they really are attracted to owning something.
Oh, yeah. And I would more specifically really drive that home into your own interview questions as far as how interested are they in owning your company's mission statement, your company's why.
That's so important, Misty, because I think as executives, we get so focused on the result, we sometimes take control of the work, and we don't allow people the opportunity to grow and develop and to own. Because over time, if 5 people can own their work and grow their initiatives, that's so much more powerful than one. And one controlling and dictating can to nowhere near have the same amount of success as 5 fully engaged individuals who are really driving a successful project.
I think this is a great conversation that would be nice to hear from some of our listeners. If you guys could tune in to the conversation on Twitter and follow us at Pure Reinvention, or on Facebook at Pure Reinvention, and let us know what you think. So have you had an experience where you have a great leader that's allowed you to own it, or maybe you are that great leader that has allowed staff to own it and really reap the benefits of it? Please share those stories with us.
And speaking of feedback, Misty, if we could get people to go to iTunes, give us a 5-star rating. That really helps our ranking there as well, and we really appreciate people listening. Remember, if you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it Pure Reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter at Pure Reinvention, or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.